Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome back to the Slang of Ages podcast. I'm your host, Preston Frazier, and on this very special episode, we speak with Kevin Mulryne about his brilliant book, Tales from Topographic Oceans, Yes Album Listening Guide. Kevin, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Preston?
I am terrific. Glad to have you back here. I think you were here last where you talked about your first book, and that was back in May of 2023. And it was a discussion of the Tormato Story, which I have
That's
here.
right.
A brilliant book. But you've outdone yourself, Kevin, with your new book. This is fantastic. And one thing that amazes me, Kevin,
Mm.
about you is that you have managed to make me fans of two of my least favorite Yes albums, Tormato and Tales from Topographic Oceans, because both books are so detailed, so many great stories, so much behind the scenes stuff that it brings the reader in.
Mm.
Now, I know, of course, as we mentioned back in 2023, you are the founder and co-host of the Yes Music podcast. So your Yes knowledge is near unparalleled. But tell us why you decided to talk about Tales from Topographic Oceans.
Well, yes, after the Tomato book, I had to decide what to do next, and I have a wonderful uh, e-newsletter which you can subscribe to over at yesmusicbooks.com. And I send a weekly email. And one of the emails, I was looking around to see what people on that email list would like me to do for the second book. So I did a sort of poll, and I was expecting maybe Close to the Edge or Relayer or, something like that. But in fact, quite strongly, people who got back to me on that poll said Tales from Topographic Oceans. And to be quite frank, I was pretty daunted by that because it's a double album. It's the grandest uh, uh, concept that Yes could possibly have gone to after finishing Close to the Edge, after losing Bill Bruford. What on earth were they going to do to top that? And of course, we know that Close to the Edge is still regarded as one of the greatest expressions of progressive rock, if not the greatest progressive rock album of all time. So, what on earth were they to do next? Well, it turned out to be a double album with a unifying theme and concept throughout it. And yes, a huge amount of music, not all of it, which actually made it onto the album. It turns out in the end, there was even more music. So, Rick Wakeman would have been even more displeased, I think, had that come about. But yeah, so that was the reason, really. And I have a long-term aim to cover as many of these albums as I possibly can in listening guides. But yeah, Tales it seemed to be the one that people wanted.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kevin. I don't know if there are any other books specifically on Tales. I don't think there are. And of course, Close to
No.
the Edge, yeah, Close to the Edge has some really good books written by it. And I think I talked to Tim Morris a few weeks ago
Mm.
about his latest re-release and also referenced his book on Yes, which is brilliant. But your book has a approach which is different than a lot of the other Yes books I've read, and it's so detailed.
Mm.
How did you go about balancing the different perspectives on this album in your book?
That's a very good question. I think what I wanted to do was to get as much of a viewpoint from not only the musicians but also the technical people who were around at the time. And when I found Gennaro Rippo, and of course, until this book, I didn't know, and I don't think anyone else knew, because he kept it a secret for 50 years, that he was involved with Tales at all. His name is on the back of the next album, Relayer, and he was Eddie Offord's right hand man, his principal guy throughout Relayer and also on the live shows there for that album as well. But no, he hadn't told anybody that he'd been involved and actually been there in Morgan Studios for every single recording session and mixing session for the Tales album. So when I found him, I knew that he would be able to give me really material that no one had ever ever come across before, because, as I say, he kept it to himself. And one of the reasons he kept it to himself was because he was working illegally in the country at the time. And he tells a wonderful story about having to leave the country while while the manager tried to get a visa for him. So he wasn't, officially in the UK at all at the time. But yes, he was there, and he became indispensable to Eddie Offord to help him and to see this music through. So that was one. But then I also was very interested in things like the instruments, as I always am, the technicalities of how and why the instruments sounded like they do. And so not only did I manage to speak to Steve Howe directly about his, I also managed to speak to Rick Wakeman about his keyboards. But then, as so often the case when I go down these enormous rabbit holes, complex rabbit holes, you find that other people know a lot of things as well. So Chris Berry was someone I spoke to, and Chris Dale, both of whom know about different aspects of the keyboards. So I just kept looking and kept finding more and more people who could help me out with knowledge and understanding. Miguel Falcao on the bass, such a masterful musician he is himself, and Peter Greenwood as well on the bass, who knew an awful lot about it and was at those first concerts. And the lovely thing is that all these people were happy to talk about it. And Chris Welsh I've talked to in the past about it, and of course he wrote his book about Yes, and so that was good to include his things there. And the Gottlieb brothers, there was just so many people who were happy to help, and that's what I tried to do, to pack in as many details as I could from as many different sources as I could.
Oh, absolutely. You pull from many, yes, expert, even though you're an expert as well. And I love the quote on the back of the book by Jeff Bailey, who's a friend of the Yes Music podcast. And Jeff wrote, whether you revere tales or revile it, this guy will reveal things you never noticed and never knew you needed to know. And that is absolutely true, Kevin. I mean, it hits on so many things I didn't know and things I wish I had known. Now, you just talked about one of my favorite sections, which also was included in the Tormato story, where you talk about the instrumentation.
Mm.
For the Tormato story, specifically, when you talked about Alan White's drums and I think the Biotron that Rick Wakeman was using. But here in the Tales from Topographic Ocean, yes, album listening guide, it's such a great section, which I loved about the instruments, and especially, again, Wakeman's instruments.
Mm.
What did you learn that was new with regard to the instrumentation from the band during making this album?
Yeah, so there were a couple of different instruments that Rick Wakeman used, which I was fascinated by. The Manda organ, because at that time, and this was pre the amazing technical things that they did for going for the one with the church organ. So this, to try and get the best organ, pipe organ sound that they possibly could for Close to the Edge, they recorded in a church in London as well. But they didn't do that for Tales. And there are some almost hidden parts of the music where pipe organ can clearly be heard. And it's not a synthetic pipe organ, it's a real pipe organ. So he had to bring into the studio this Manda portable pipe organ. And yeah, as soon as I went down that rabbit hole, that took me further again to find various other prog rock musicians who had used this Manda organ. And I'll leave you to read that chapter. But it's fascinating that this was a console. So you have the keyboard separate to the pipes. And what they used to have to do is put the pipes off stage at the back. It would have been nice if they had been the real pipes that Roger Dean designed into the back, into the scenery. That would have been fantastic, but they weren't. Mm-hmm. So they were off stage, stationed off stage. And then there was this great coil of leads for this organ. So they all had to be taken care of. And just, in fact, one lead for every note of the pipe organ. So it's an incredible technical feat to get this thing onto the stage. I don't think it was actually used on the US tour at all. I think it only appeared on the UK tour, but yes, it was a technical headache. And the other thing, though, which is remarkable, is the double mellotron. So this was at the time a unique idea, and Rick Wakeman had always used a couple of mellotrons, particularly live, playing one with one hand and one with the other hand. But what always happens with mellotrons is it's very, very difficult to keep them in tune with each other and with the rest of the band, because fluctuations in the power going to the different machines can affect the sound. It actually sags if it gets less power coming into it. The sound of the organ sags and goes down. So his idea was to get the two of the mellotrons which he'd used previously and put them into one case, which was a fantastic idea. It didn't actually work in the end. It didn't. They were just as difficult two in one case as two separate ones. But it was a fantastic idea that you could play even more different voices at the same time. And this was pre all the digital equipment, of course. This was 73. This is really early on in the development of keyboards and synths and so on. So he combined those sounds into that double mellotron, and it's one of the unique sounds. And because when he was creating this double mellotron, he also got the mellotron company to create different tapes. So a lot of the sounds that he used, simply because he didn't like the other tapes, there were things about them that were not as good as he thought they should be. So he used unique tapes for this album, and every time he used the double mellotron after that. So yeah, that was fascinating. In terms of other instruments, the ones that stick out to me were, for example, Chris Squire's acoustic bass that he used within Tales, and I was very, very fortunate to find I've forgotten his first name. How awful of me. The collector who actually has that acoustic bass, and I went to his house and I saw Chris Squire's acoustic bass that was used both on the road and to record Tales. Clive Ayer, I just remember.
Clive Ayer collection,
Clive
right?
Ayer, absolutely. So that was a real thrill to see that. We associate Chris Squire with the Rickenbacker bass, of course, and the wall bass, the triple necked bass. But this was one of those very rare occasions where he used an acoustic instrument just to get a particular sound. And that's something that came through very, very strongly from talking to everybody about it, was the attention to detail, the number of hours they spent on this record, as they always did, but the number of hours and the ingenuity and the different ways that they found different sounds to be most appropriate for this music.
Kevin, in your opinion, who was the biggest driver for the music and the sound for the album, or was it one particular person?
Well, I think it was very much John Anderson and Steve Howe who were the driving force behind it. I mean, they basically spent hours on tour together coming up with the ideas. Well, John came up with the concept in the first place, which he got from various sources. But the two of them spent many, many hours together creating this music. And then it was a case of attempting to get the rest of the band really excited by it and interested in it. And certainly Steve Howe said to me that Alan White was 100% behind it. Chris Squire came round to it and then spent, as he always did, hours and hours through the night perfecting his parts, and every single note had to be perfect. And Rick Wakeman, as always, for the more outlandish aspects of Yes music, he was very, very difficult indeed. He didn't understand it, made no secret that he didn't understand it. But, and this is something Gennaro Rippo stressed to me, and something that Rick Wakeman himself said to me, was that he never gave less than 100%. So, okay, it wasn't his favorite Yes music. He didn't think they should be doing it, but and you can hear this on the record, all his playing is masterful, as you would expect from Rick Wakeman, and he absolutely put the effort in. That's one of the other fascinating things I came across, was that there's a famous photograph of the mixing. So all of the members of the band plus Eddie Offord mixing in Morgan Studios, and then Gennaro Rippo is off camera, watching them being photographed. But famously, Rick Wakeman is almost completely flat, lying on his back with headphones on, not taking part in the mixing whatsoever. And just as I was finishing off the book, I said to Gennaro Rippo, what on earth was going on there? Was he just so bored that he didn't want to be there? And Gennaro said, well, no, actually, he 100% trusted Eddie Offord to mix the keyboards as he wanted them. And the other thing, as I say, just before I finished the book, I listened to Rick Wakeman's podcast, and he talked about mixing. And he said that he got his ideas on mixing for the whole of his career from meeting David Bowie and talking to David Bowie about mixing. And David Bowie never went to mixing sessions. And he said to Rick, don't go to the mixing sessions. What will happen is you'll get so bored and so jaded by listening to the record that you'll never like it afterwards. And you'll always hate this music that you've made. So he took that absolutely to heart. And that's why he seemed so disinterested in the mixing. It wasn't that he was bored. He just didn't want to over-labor the music and become too familiar with it.
And it's not as if he's not well represented the album, because he certainly is. His parts are really wonderful. And he did get a co-writing credit for the Remembering, along with Alan White and Chris Squire. I think that was the only song that they actually wrote as a group. So his inputs were there. I think a lot of the folklore around Wakeman's love or not love for the album comes around the touring part, when they toured Europe for the albums.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, a bit like Bill Bruford. Bill Bruford, in the end, hated touring with Yes because he had to play the same thing every night. And being a jazz man, he wanted to improvise all the time and play it differently, whereas the rest of the band wanted to preserve those precise arrangements that they had come up with on the record. And yes, because Rick, and really because Rick was at the stage of his career where if he didn't like the music they were doing in Yes, and he didn't, he, I'm sure, was always thinking, not at the back of his mind, but at the front of his mind, I don't need to be here. I could be off touring my own music, making my own extravaganzas, and why on earth am I doing this? And so, yes, he decided to quit before they finished the UK tour. So they did 5 nights at the Rainbow Theatre. And during that run, Rick Wakeman decided that he was leaving, and he was going to leave before they went on the North American tour. He was persuaded by the rest of the band and the manager to stay on that occasion, and so he did stay until the end of the tour. So yes, he was unhappy. He was unhappy with the direction of the music, the direction of the band, and he really wanted to get out on his own and go some different ways. And as he said to me, it was only when Going for the One came around that he felt that yes, music was back, and he was happy to be back in the band. Although that's another story about exactly how he came back into the band, but that's for another day. So yes, certainly he was unhappy with the situation, but he did eventually stay for the whole tour. And there is, of course, that story about the curry eating incident, and I do cover that. But
yes,
actually, I think the truth of that is in Grumpy Old Rockstar, in Rick Wakeman's book. He explains it most carefully, and of course, he's a raconteur. He's a wonderful speaker and a humorous and comic speaker. So he likes to embellish it when he he feels like it. But the real story is that, yes, there was a curry, but it wasn't anything to do with Rick Wakeman ordering it. It was a misunderstanding between him and his roadie, his tech guy. And his tech guy said to him, well, do you fancy a curry? And Rick Wakeman said yes, assuming he meant after the concert was over. But in fact, the roadie went off, technician went off and got curry right then and there. And the next thing Rick Wakeman knew about it was that he could smell the curry under the keyboards, and the technician was handing the curry up to him. So yes, it did happen. It was in Manchester, wasn't it? The Free Trade Hall in Manchester. But it wasn't quite as people say that, you know, he was bored of playing, so he thought he'd have a curry. No, that wasn't quite how it happened.
Kevin, in your opinion, is this the most, well, I guess I'll use the term progressive Yes album?
Is it the most progressive Yes album? I think it's probably in about the top 3 most progressive in terms of trying new things and going different ways. I think Relayer also sits in that little group, and I think Close to the Edge does as well. I think when they got as far as going for the One, they were trying to capitalize on what those foundations that they'd built, but it doesn't go dramatically into new areas. Whereas I think Close to the Edge definitely does, because it was the most remarkable thing anyone had ever heard in rock music. Tales takes it even further, because, as I said at the beginning of this chat, what are they going to do? They've done Close to the Edge. What do you do next? Well, you do a whole 4-sided single piece in 4 movements. That's what you do. And then Relayer, bringing in those elements of Patrick Moraz, and not all of that music was down to Patrick Moraz, of course, but he did bring in those elements that even Rick Wakeman wouldn't have thought of, because he's a different player. And so the very, very much jazz and the fusion and all those sort of influences that came in. So I think that's also dramatically different. So I think those 3 albums, and certainly in terms of the scope and the scale of Tales, I think it goes much further than any other Yes album, and probably any other rock album of all time. And so it definitely deserves its place there at the pinnacle. But yeah, I would say that those 3 probably are the most.
You also, in your book, give a really good account of the live performances of some of these songs. And recently, Yes had, well, not recently, I guess maybe a year ago. Was it last year? Last tour they did what was the tour called?
The classic Tales of Yes.
Classic Tales of Yes, and then Topographic Drama, which I think was 3 or 4 years before that.
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to catch either one of those tours or both those tours?
Yes, I did see both of those. And hearing side 1 and 4 of Tales, and I think that was right back in 2018, was the 50th anniversary. And that was fantastic. I loved that. It was wonderful to hear those whole movements played. Now, of course, sides 2 and 3 are a different story. They haven't played those complete live for a very, very long time. And then, yes, there was the excerpts from Tales version, which they did the last time they were out, and I enjoyed that. And of course, I enjoyed those snippets of music which we haven't heard since the original tour, which were played, but just snippets. And I thought the way that they packaged it together worked very well in its own terms. Of course, I would have preferred to hear more of the record. And it's always, whenever you rearrange something and condense something like that, if you're one of those people like us who know Tales so intimately and so well, when they get to the end of one particular section and then sort of segue into the next section that they've chosen, you do always think, that's just there's a bit coming up that they've missed out, and I really wanted to hear them play that bit. So it's never going to be as satisfying. But on the other hand, if it gives you that chance to hear music that you will never otherwise hear the band playing, rather than a tribute band playing, then that's got to be a good thing. And I understood why Steve had done that, and being one of those two principal writers of the original, then it's fair enough. He can do what he likes with it. He wrote it, so so I thought that was fair. It was a good way of doing it, enabling us to hear more than we'd heard for such a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. I really, really loved the topographical drama tour, combining those two albums, which I did not think would fit together, but fit together relatively well. And since I wasn't a big fan of sides 2 and 3 of Tales from Topographic Oceans, it worked out for me well. But I thought it was great that they made it an attempt to present that. I was hoping for Relay or last tour and didn't get that. We may never get that. So I'll keep my fingers crossed. So you also do a very good analysis with regard to, in both books, the Tormato Story and Tales from Topographic Ocean, yes, album listening guide, talking about the artwork. And the artwork on both your books is also wonderful. Did you get any additional insight about the artwork?
Well, the artwork was fascinating because I looked into it, as it were. So it's an amazing landscape picture, as you know. And I noticed a few things which I hadn't thought of before. And I found some articles as well where people had analyzed it purely from an artistic point of view, not from the musical point of view. And so there are various techniques which Roger Dean used, and Roger Dean's a fascinating character. I did speak to him. I met him at the Birmingham concert the last time Yes played there, and I spoke to him about the front cover of Tales, and the interior, in fact. And he's fascinating because, on the one hand, this is over 50 years ago, and to be fair to the guy, he can't remember a lot of the things that he put into these artworks. Sure. And why should he? And he's much more interested in what he's still doing. But of course, he was very gracious and spoke to me about it. But yes, there are different ways you can analyze front cover. And of course, being a wraparound cover, it's the whole effect of the painting is very different when you've got just the front cover, as opposed to when you open the whole thing out. And you can analyze it in terms of the golden section lines that you can analyze any painting using, and one of those section lines cuts right through the pyramid on the horizon, for example. And then lots of other lines all lead to the pyramid. All that was fascinating, and there are more not pyramids, but there are more triangles which seem to lead your eye into the painting, and it's all fascinating. But then also I went down so many more rabbit holes here as well, because there are just snippets sometimes. And I picked up this word that Roger Dean used to describe everything on the cover, because everything on that cover, as he points out, everything is real. All the other covers, or almost all the other covers he's ever done, they are fantasy worlds. But everything on the cover, front and back, of Tales is a real location that you can go and visit. So I did track down which ones they were. But yes, I saw him using this word geomantic when he was talking about it, and that's something you've got to dig into. So this is going back to divination or something. I mean, some kind of arcane practices, and there are these 16 geomantic figures, which I assume he must have been referring to. And the one that grabbed me from the painting is the waterfall. Now, of course, Roger Dean always does the most amazing waterfalls, and if you think of Close to the Edge, all those waterfalls there, all those impossible waterfalls like this one, which has no source and it doesn't go anywhere. And also, we're supposed to be underwater, so quite why there's a waterfall underwater is a little mysterious. But yes, he uses this one particular shape, which appears to be a geomantic shape for the waterfall. It's got 3 rocks at the bottom, which form a kind of pyramid, and then some, and the water goes up in the front. So yes, you can look into that. And, you can believe as much of this as you like or not. That's absolutely fine. But I just found more and more in this. And the thing that's convinced me that there was something about this waterfall is that he then reused it on the front cover of one of the compilation albums, whichever one it was. I've now forgotten which one it was. Yes, he is.
Okay.
So it appears on that front cover as well. So certainly it meant something to Roger. And he also, of course, doesn't always want to, reveal everything. He likes a bit of mystery because that's what his artwork is all about, and that's what we like, really, is reading into this stuff like we can read into the music itself, but reading into the artwork's what we want to get out of it, and that's important in the end.
Well, Tales from Topographic Oceans, Yes Album Listening Guide is a fascinating, detailed look at an album which some people don't understand. And I think this book definitely helps me understand it a lot better. And I have the Steven Wilson remixes on record. So I've been listening to those, and I appreciate your analysis with regards to the distinctions of different types of versions of this album. Kevin, this is brilliant. So what is next for you in terms of your writing journey?
Well, yes. So I am going to go on to more listening guides, and I really must get on to Relayer because that's a fan favorite. That's one of my favorites. Mark Anthony Kay, who does the Yes Music podcast with me, his favorite. So definitely it's one I need to cover. And I also want to talk to Gennaro Rippo about that because he was there for all of that as well. So I have that link. However, in the meantime, I've got together with Barry Plummer, who is the legendary photographer, rock photographer, and he took lots of photographs that I've used in the book, both live and studio photographs of Yes. So I've got together with him, and I'm creating a book which I've called Master of Images, taken from Awaken by Yes. Master of Images, Barry Plummer's Yes legacy. And so I'm going to use as many as I can of his existing Yes photographs that he took through the 70s and 80s and form those into a book and write about the concert or the situation around those photographs. So that'll be in color, and next year that'll be published. In the meantime, if you want to sign up for my e-newsletter, you'll get a chance to own a unique 2026 Barry Plummer calendar. So again, I've put that together from his amazing Yes photos. So if you want to do that, just sign up for the e-newsletter over at yesmusicbooks.com. Just get my little plug in there before I go.
Excellent, Kevin. Fantastic stuff. Of course, for those listening, check out the Yes Music podcast. It has been such a wealth of knowledge for me, and I appreciate both your books. They're both wonderful. There's so much here. You could read it, then you could read it again because you'll miss stuff. There's so much here, Kevin. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for all Yes Music fans. Thank you for progressive rock fans. And thank you for your podcast as well. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right.